Hey guys, it's me, God's Comic Brad Stein. This is Brad Stein Has Issues, where Christianity, comedy, and conservatism collide in a cacophony of clarity. Well, today we have a very special guest, ObjectivelyDan. He is someone we had on last week. He is the atheist who I began my conversation called the Atheist Experiment to see if I could explore if it is possible to be an atheist and live that way if you believe that there is no God, and if you can live that way without having to borrow from theism. And so we're going to talk to him today, get a part two, and maybe it might inspire you to think about how to think about what you believe and how you see the world as a believer. So I don't need to tell you what we're going to be talking about today, because it is so obvious, and it is so unique and terrifying and confusing and painful and evil and dark, that it really is self-explanatory. As I film this particular episode, and I always say that, I watermark them with something significant is going to be referenced, because people might be watching this 10 years from now or 3 years from now. But just last Wednesday, this is Monday, I was walking through Nashville Airport. I was heading to Albuquerque, New Mexico. Going to work with my friend Daniel Lesko, the director. It was the 10-year anniversary of the film Persecuted, that dealt with what would happen if the government began to persecute and set up Christians in America who weren't playing ball and compromising their faith or their ministry for some political agenda. So it was a very, dark, mysterious, faith-based film. Certainly had a uniqueness and wonderful actors in it. And I was going to go do the 10-year anniversary, and then also help a ministry over there that brings men in out of drug addiction. A lot of problems there in Albuquerque. And partner with a brand new movie that Daniel's getting involved with called John Newton, that deals with the man who was a slave trader and ended up writing the words Amazing Grace when his life was changed. So it was a big weekend, and I was leaving on Wednesday, and I'm walking through the airport, and I happened to look up at the television as I'm walking past one of the restaurants, and it says up on it, Charlie Kirk has been shot. And I'm like, going, what? You got to be kidding me. Man, are you serious? So that was obviously disheartening. And, I'm like praying for him immediately, of course, praying for God to help him through whatever trauma he's just experienced. You're presuming that somehow he was just shot and they took off and he's kind of in intensive care, but, they'll get him through it and whatever. And kept walking and getting ready to get on my flight. And I did get on the flight. And as we were getting on there, a gentleman right in front of me to the right had on Fox News, I guess, on his computer, because you can watch on Southwest on the computer. And it was talking about this shooting and what had happened, that he had, there was unknown what his, prognosis was at that point. And so it's, again, praying and just kind of hanging on for some good news. And we start heading towards Albuquerque. And the man continues to have on or rebooted up the news. And I'm trying to kind of look at it and see what's going on. And it mentions talking now about the assassination of Charlie Kirk. And now it just hit me full face, gut shot. He's dead. He had been murdered. And I just kind of was in shock. I was in disbelief. I was mortified. I just kind of began to kind of pound on my armrest. But I felt tears welling up inside of me, and I found myself just kind of overwhelmed with grief and shock and unbelief. I'm sure everybody out there watching this had the same experience. And just trying to grapple with what has happened, what is going on. But I remember going through my phone, and somehow a clip had come on of him, and supposedly showing him being shot. And you did see him sort of pull back with a microphone and kind of pull back. And then it kind of had him slumped over, and just blood is just pouring out. And I thought it was AI. I thought somebody had just sort of gotten a clip of him and literally created this graphic, horrible, just AI of him dying, and bleeding out. And it was very disturbing, but it was so graphic that I just assumed it was fake. I didn't really think anything of it at that point. And so obviously it wasn't long after that I realized that this was true. That not only was this fine brother killed, but he was done for the whole world. His family, his friends, the unbelievable had taken place right in front of all of us. And of course, in this day and age with phones and videos and every kind of ringtones and whatnot, or whatever you call them, rings, bells, everything, nothing will ever be private again. We're going to have a video of everything that ever happens from this day forward. And it's hard to grapple with, though, in some interesting respect, because of that new world of ours. That's part of how they helped locate this guy, was because they found somebody's home had their ring bell, or something was picking up somebody crawling across or jumping down the backyard or something. Anyways, it ended up that same technology actually, I think, helped figure out who this guy was. But there it was. And so I just felt such absolute despair and heaviness and brokenness and confusion and just I couldn't wrap my mind around what I was dealing with. But there was a lot of reasons that went beyond just the horrible murder of an innocent young man who was such an impact, such a brilliant guy. The thing that amazed me about him wasn't just that he had some thoughts about all these different subjects, but his data that he could pull from his head. He could give percentages, and he seemed to know a lot about what was happening overseas and about different senators and congressmen and their names, and it just, statistics and things along that. So, I mean, he really was a unique kind of savant when it came to that, and had such this sort of charismatic personality, and he's one of a kind. You can't just fake that. That was who he was. And he was such an incredible advocate for Christianity, for the conservative movement, and for youth. I mean, he was 31, but I know a lot of young men, especially, just gravitated. He was a superstar to these young men, teens and into their 20s. We've lived in a nation, in a culture for so long that has been so nihilistic. Part of that emphasis came from the new atheists, by the way, which is ironic because we're going to be talking to an atheist today. And part of my whole premise of the atheism is you have given nothing to humanity that's good. Nothing. It's nothing but despair. Life has no meaning. We are purposeless, which also means, by the way, there's no justice, right? There's no ultimate justice. We just all kind of vanish into oblivion, and who cares if you murdered people or you didn't? It doesn't really matter because we're all going to just vanish away. So it does, I guess, tie into worldviews and philosophies and what you believe and how you think and what does it mean to choose God or no God, and how does that affect this behavior and the choices you're going to make. And so I'm grappling with this guy and this intellect and this amazing young man who helped get President Trump elected. He definitely was a huge catalyst in getting youth vote, which never happened to Republicans. He really was a force of nature and had created from like at 18, had created this this Turning Point USA at 18 to go into campuses and talk and see if we could reach a consensus or convince somebody to maybe rethink, or at least to show that you could agree to disagree agreeably. I mean, nothing is more American than that. And as a comic, how many times, if you watch my show or listen to my show, have I said the First Amendment is the key, the barometer for a nation's freedom is in its speech. That tells you what kind of a nation you have. Can you speak freely? Can you disagree? Can you tell somebody, in a contentious way, I think what you're doing is wrong, bad, evil? Can you say contrarian things? Can you say things that people consider hateful? And the answer is, if you're free, yes, you can. Yes, you must. Yes, it's important. If you cannot hear information that you disagree with without harming someone, you're the monster. This is what makes intellect so important. When I started the militia of the mind, that was the whole point. It's the militia. They're going to get guns and shoot. But my thinking was, and I said this from the get-go, let's out-think these people. Let's out-talk to these people. Dialogue these people. Out-pray these people. Out-faith these people. Let's show how it can be done without having to resort to violence. But the left took control of the language. And what did I say? And how many times have I said it on the stage? Whoever controls the words controls the people. And you watched the left over and over again say, you are a Nazi. You are a fascist. You are a bigot. You are phobic. We watch it happen over and over and over again to people they simply didn't agree with, and they are allowed to disparage your character, and they don't have to be accurate. This is the great evil of this thing, is they get to call you a name, demand it is true, not have to prove it, which gave them permission to kill this guy. Because if you were a murderer and people said you're a murderer and everybody believed it, you would have the right to try to defend yourself and end their life. So it gave them permission. The left has given themselves permission to kill those they disagree with. Now, this hits home for me because I'm a comedian. I need access to words. I need access to topics. And part of what makes comedy so interesting and so important is that it talks about the issues that are happening in the real world. It talks about those ideas and it mocks them and makes fun of them and finds the humor in it. It does these things, and I do it from all sides. I always have. You can see tons of my YouTube videos. I make fun of Christians. I make fun of leftists. I make fun of atheists. I make fun of everybody, because that's what comedy's for. That's what free speech is for. That's what irony is for. That's what sarcasm is for. That's what seeking to understand culture and exposing it, or finding humor in it, or idiosyncrasies in it that need to be evaluated. That's what I'm here for. That's my calling. That's what the culture needs. That guy that takes the steam out of the kettle and finds funny even in the things that we find difficult to grapple with. politically or academically. So it was a lot at stake. A lot at stake. But the things that he talked about, DEI, diversity hiring, whatever, the different, this LGBTQ and all these different things. I talk about those things. All the things he talked about, I talk about as a comedian, because that's what it means to be in a free country. And so to watch, and it's happened for so many years now, academia is the cancer. Academia has taught our kids, our youth of Americans, that you don't have to listen to things you don't like. As a matter of fact, if they speak these words you don't like, you can call it violence. And if it's violence, I'm allowed to defend myself. That's where they've given them permission now to hunt and kill Christian conservatives, of which I am one. I'm sitting here in my own little podcast and have said for a long time, if somebody says you're being politically correct, say thank you for the compliment, because it means you are a contrarian. You have the courage to just say what you think is important and what is true and what is relevant to reality. So be that guy. If everybody, it was what I said during Corona, when I walked down Chicago O'Hare Airport and had no mask on, and everybody did, and I was filming it because I knew I needed to have a record. That maybe everybody will start pulling them off and going, this ain't America. This isn't constitutional. We have the freedom to take our own risk. And nobody did. And I knew as pastors heard the government tell them that they were unessential and they said, fine, we'll shut her down. I knew America wasn't the same anymore. There wasn't courage anymore. There wasn't a fabric of freedom more important than life. And so I'm looking at it going, are you kidding me? I grew up in a different time when we all could speak freely. And you didn't have to like the guy, but you didn't get to shoot him. And the only ones that really might get shot would be political figures, because they have some power, right? They have some ability to make bills and to make laws and do different things. But this was just a citizen. He was you. He was me. This is why it hit people so hard. This is just a guy saying, here's what I think. And they say, oh, really? You're dead. And now we realize, oh, it's on. The line has been crossed. Now what? Because you can't stop it. You can't stop somebody from taking a gun and shooting somebody. They said about Charlie that at one point he said, listen, to have a place where guns are allowed in a country where guns are allowed by the citizenry, that there will be some deaths and they will have to be accepted as the price, unfortunately, of having access to firearms. The Second Amendment was designed to protect its citizens from its government. That's what it was designed to do. That's why people that are pro-Second Amendment are so adamant about it. It's not because they want people killed. They don't. They certainly don't want children killed. And so some lunatic with some mental disorder takes a gun and gets into a school and just shoots children. They're crazy. And they had access to something that could kill people. So it's terrible, terrible combination, obviously. But I got to tell you guys, I've seen what happens when a government can disarm their citizenry. Totalitarianism happens every time because you can't defend yourself. So every totalitarian government starts by disarming its citizens. So listen, I'm going to just say this, guys. I don't know what the heck this is going to mean in the future. None of us do. But I am not going to stop joking about the things I joke about. I'm certainly not going to stop talking about Jesus Christ as the Messiah, as the God-man. I will never not speak that name. And I'm going to do it probably 100 times as much and as adamantly now as I've ever done. And I thought I was doing pretty good. But now it's like, no, Jesus, you will be at the top of my list of names and ideas that I will thrust in the marketplace, irrespective of what people think. And if somebody kills me for that, let me go on record right now as saying, I would still say I believe in the Second Amendment. So I'm saying it out of my own mind. And if I end up being dead and you're watching this, I don't care. Because freedom means somebody might abuse it and harm people. But I don't want innocent people who want to defend themselves being punished because a lunatic abused freedom. That's the cost of freedom. It's all in. Cost you everything. One of my most popular videos on YouTube is I'm a conservative. And I say, I want to conserve truth, not lies. I want to conserve truth. I want to conserve history. I want to conserve the Constitution as it was originally intended. I want to conserve the ability to look at life and all the history of life and see what worked and what didn't so we can try to make the best decisions. I want to conserve true history. Whatever bad was done, let's talk about it. But whatever good was done, let's talk about it. I want to conserve things. That's what conservatism does. It likes to conserve traditions. It likes to hang on to foundations that got it somewhere. It's not afraid to change, and it will alter things if they think that there's a better way. But what they don't do is just immediately change everything because they think it's a new, better way without carefully assessing it and making sure, like G.K. Chesterton said, if I'm going through a field and I see a fence, before I take it down, I need to discover what it was up there for. So I am, always, and you guys watch my show, you've seen what I talk about. I've always said, hey, man, this might cost me everything, because apparently people now are getting to where you are violent and evil if you use words they don't like. And it was always, I knew it was coming. I've talked to you guys about the persecuted church that I've prayed for and begged for God to help and intervene. Well, now the persecuted church, as I said, would happen in America. It's here. One of our people has been butchered in front of us for his faith, for his values. Now, conservatism is a political concept, but some of the ideas, a lot of the ideas have their roots in Judeo-Christian ethics, the Western ethics, right? Smaller government, God is in control, I don't worship the state. Lower taxes, that's stealing, right? Trying to take care of folks by helping them get up on their own 2 feet, not giving them a handout and stealing their dignity. These are conservative things that also are Christian ideas. So we live in a culture now that is completely different. We watched people go online and dance to this man's death. Cheer it, laugh, mock it, have their name attached and send it out and feel good about themselves. Now we know who they are. Your neighbor, your anesthesiologist, your teacher doesn't care if you die, if you're a Christian or a conservative. They don't care. You deserve it. I was angry and I battled hatred, wanting to throttle these people, wanted to destroy these people. And have you ever noticed, and this is important, that, and I've seen people already comment about that, when leftist ideas are breached, they burn down buildings, they loot, they riot, they destroy. Conservatives, especially young conservatives, lost an icon to them, their champion. Not a building was burned. Not a riot was hit. Nothing. See, the left has this great advantage of knowing that they can mock Christians because we're not allowed to go kill them for that. Our religion forbids it. So they take advantage of us being weaker. And this is fascinating because one of the ideas of the left is that those who are in power oppress. Well, the greatest, and I've said this before, the biggest, and I said this with ObjectivelyDan, who's about to be on our show, the biggest religion in the world is Christianity. We have the most numbers of all. And yet, guess who is the number one persecuted religious group on earth? You think, well, it must be Muslims, because if the Christians are number one, then they're persecuting the Muslims. But it isn't. Well, maybe it's Hindus. No. Maybe it's Buddhists. How about the atheists? Christians are killing atheists everywhere they go. No. The number one persecuted religious group on earth are Christians. How is that possible? We have the numbers, yet we're being persecuted more than anybody. Why? Because we're not allowed to kill you and hunt you down because you have a different belief. And if someone has ever done that and tried to justify it in Christianity, the Bible is self-refuting. It says, oh, no, I never gave you permission. The very Bible that they might have tried to squeeze in some reason to go harm somebody, that's the same Bible chastised them, said, wrong, repent, you're wrong. We don't do that. We have to do something that is so absurd, it's beyond comprehension. Love your enemies. Why? Why do I have to love my enemies? They're my enemies. Maybe I could understand, avoid your enemies, run from your enemies. God said, love them. And then he said, pray for those that despitefully use you. Think about what the Bible said in that verse. Love your enemies and pray for those that despitefully use you. That means that there are despicable people on this earth. There are people who danced and mocked and ridiculed this man, his children, his wife, and gleefully did. It was demonic. They're despicable people. They're monsters. They're demonic. And God said, pray for them. And the reason that we have to love our enemies, and the enemy is, remember, someone who fights against you, who despises you, who wants to harm you, who does not want any flourishing for you. So they, of all the people that don't deserve love, it's them. And God said, love them. And to pray for those that despitefully use you, which would mean pray for their repentance, pray for them to come to a moral place where they want to be good people, not evil people, not relishing darkness. And the thing about God is we have the God-man, the Christ, who suffered for our sake. That when we say, love your enemy, it's like, because Jesus can say to us, because you were my enemy. You rebelled. You brought sin onto this earth. I created it for you to have a perfection, and you destroyed it. You brought the cancer here. Humans. And I didn't get rid of you. I didn't make a new batch. I said, now I'm going to sacrifice myself for you, and you don't deserve it. You were my enemy. And I said, I'm going to love you. You despitefully used me. You hung me on a cross. And I said, forgive them. They don't know what they're doing. God says, I want you to love your enemy and pray for those who despitefully use you, because you have done the same to me, and I gave you grace and mercy and forgiveness. It's your turn to be Jesus and give it to the other group that don't deserve it either. Are these people despicable that dance and mock and ridicule and find great glee the death of this man who was murdered in front of his family? Are they despicable? The Bible says they are. And I say they are. I pray for their salvation because God would ask me to, because I got saved and I didn't deserve it. But there's another reason we're supposed to love our enemies and pray for those who are despicable, who are monsters. The other reason is because it's not just for them, and it is. It's for me too. I pray for those that despitefully use me so that I don't become a monster too. I love my enemies so I don't become them. It is counterintuitive. It fights against everything your natural body wants to do, which is to defend itself. And God says, I want you to show people what it looks like to do what none of these people will ever do for you, Christians. They're never going to love you, and they're never going to allow you to have a freedom to just think and believe and speak differently. And that's what it means to be a Christian. Folks, I don't know how badly this is going to continue, or if there's going to be a reckoning. I don't know. If guys like me who just want to speak freely and comedically, but certainly to my faith, have to wonder if this is the day I get shot. I don't know. I guess so. I guess so. So I'm here to ask you guys, and I've asked you this before, I think. What are you willing to die for? If you have nothing to die for, you have nothing worth living for. You know, I'm an older guy. I'm a boomer. I'm going to die soon. Matter of fact, the Bible says it is appointed unto man once to die, and after that, the judgment. So we're appointed. It's like it's already done in God's world. I've already died in his world. It's already appointed to die once, just once. And so I think about, well, I guess I could make it to old age, but when I die, and it will be, at least with probably, unless God just lets me go crazy, at least max 20 years, max. Unless I get one of these crazy guys that lives to be 100. I don't see that happening. So I already don't got a lot of time left, for real. So there's like 3 ways I can die. 1, I can die of old age. And usually that ain't pretty. It's not like everybody's robust and happy and living their life and woohoo. And that's like, he died. He was 89. But everything was great and he was dancing and jumping around, and then he just died that night of old age. And usually you're pretty in miserable shape by the time you get there. But I could die of old age. 2, I could die from something outside of my control. I got cancer. I got a tumor. I got hit by a car, right? So that's the other way you die. Something happens to you that is out of your control. But the third way is murder. What if somebody said that I don't want Christians around anymore because you stand for morals that we consider repulsive, and thus we're going to kill you for your belief system? Murder is another way you can be killed. And that makes you a martyr if you were killed for Christ. And yet he said, greater love hath no man than he gives up his life for his brother. So if the greatest love you can do is to die for someone else, what must that be like amplified if you die for Jesus? All of this time, folks, for years on this podcast, I have said to you, we read it like it's a metaphor. It's not. It's real. And now we have seen it with our own eyes, how real it is. Hell's here. And the bloodshed has begun. So, if I had to choose, or was given the chance to choose of those 3 ways to die, I'd choose the Jesus murder route. Because it means I gave something to God and proved I was serious about this. Like, do you think I want to be shot and killed or stabbed with a knife or run over with a car because somebody doesn't like me? Of course not. I'm not a fool. I'm not wanting to be a martyr. I don't want it to happen to me. No, I'm not pretending like I'm a hero. I'm not. You know how many times people have come up to me over my years and said, oh, you have the courage to say things that we don't have the courage to say, or thank you for standing up for these things. I've thought about these things. And all I was doing was going against political correctness. And I'm like going, enough already. It's your turn to jump in. It's not just mine. My hope was not only to show you courage, but to encourage you to be courageous too. You're going to die. Do you want to die a coward or die a man who said, I stood up for something. It wasn't worth it. I stood in front of my family just a few years ago when I knew I was going all in for Christ. And I said to them, if I die for these beliefs that I'm going to speak, know that your dad showed you one thing, that there are things in life more important than life. I died for something that mattered. I died for the God I believe will bring me home forever, and it's worth it. It's an honor. It's a privilege. But now it's real. What will you die for? Because for sure, God is weeding out the weak and the lukewarm and the fence sitters and the goats and the sheep and the wheat and the tares. And he's saying, who's ready to go all in? Because that's what I expected all along. Don't you get it, American Christian? The moment you said, I accept Jesus as my Savior, you died. Every other Christian around the world knew, for the most part, when they said yes to Christ, it might very, very, very real cost them their lives, and it does all the time. It cost them in Syria, in Libya, in Algeria, in Lebanon, in Jordan, in Saudi Arabia, in United Arab Emirates, in Iran, Iraq, Afghanistan, Morocco, Pakistan, Turkey, Myanmar, Tibet, Turks and Caicos, Maldives, India, Nigeria, Congo, Uganda, South Africa, China, North Korea, Haiti, Cuba, Indonesia, Vietnam, Uzbekistan, Europe, Canada now, New Zealand, Australia, and now in America. It costs you this time, and it always was supposed to. That's why he said, count the cost, guys. This ain't going to be easy, because I didn't call you to be a Christian. I called you to be a disciple, and that means I want all of you. I gave you everything that I was. A God-man became like you. You didn't deserve it. I gave it all away. Then I said, now you do it. You're going to be with me in eternity. It's worth it. But you better be prepared to stand up, even if you do it alone, and even if it costs you everything. The moment you said you're mine, the moment you said I accept your sacrifice, Christ, you died. Now it's real. Are you all in or not? I am. I'm going to love my enemy. I'm going to pray for those that despitefully use me. I'm going to do comedy the best I can, because that's my delivery system. That's the package God gave me to tell his story and to tell the story of what I think is true about life, to help and encourage others and try to inspire them to move into discipleship. That's why I do my ministry. It's what I am. It's what happened when my comedy turned into something much more. If you are a church, contact me at info@bradstein.com. Let me come to your church. Yes, I'll bring humor. That's my vehicle. But I will encourage and inspire your people to start moving into discipleship. We need a great awakening in this country, and it's only Jesus. It ain't Trump. It ain't the Republicans. It ain't the Democrats. It ain't conservatism. It ain't even anything else but Jesus. This is our only hope. And who is going to deliver that message? Christians, true believers, those who've accepted Christ's sacrifice, who did all the work. And then they said, we will now be your disciple, Lord. Send us into the fray, and we will fight honorably with your word. That's what it means now to be a Christian in America. Are you in or are you out? The guest we have today is ObjectivelyDan. I already had an interview with him. It was quite interesting. A lot of people liked it and commented, and especially when it went out into the internet. And I told him it was an experiment. So I said, well, let's do it again and see if I can learn from that. And I'm still going to work it out. I don't usually do debates, right? So it was new for me to figure it out, but I wanted to prove what I think is demonstrably true, that you cannot live a life that is objective, that is moral, that is ethical, that is logical, and be a true atheist, because there's nothing in atheism that gives you access to anything. You're simply determined, or you're just molecules in motion. God gives us purpose and meaning. They don't understand it. You heard from the first time I spoke to them. They still think as long as you just kind of have meaning, that's enough. They don't understand that when everything disappears, it's like we were never here, since there's nobody here to analyze our existence. So it really is kind of a pretend game. It's self-delusion. But the second interview I had, he actually said at the end, man, this was so much better. He felt like there was so much more interest in this and intrigue. And so, I'm trying to learn. I'm trying to grow. I'm trying to figure out what it means to be a believer, and to encourage, but to stand strong and firm in my belief as a Christ follower. And I hope you enjoy it. And I hope you watch as this podcast grows more and more into trying to give you tools and insights and inspiration to observe the world as it is, see it through the eyes of Christ, and what it means to be a Christian, and how to observe these things, and how to become a disciple, how to try to become deeper, more committed, more fully, vibrantly ready to do whatever God would ask of us as you go further into an America, a new America that we don't even know how to grapple with yet. But we're the Christians. We're the truth tellers. So let's mark our line in the sand and say, we will not compromise. Jesus isn't just what I believe. He's God, and he's the only truth in religious terms, in history. He's the way, the truth, and life. No man comes to the Father but through him. Let's talk about it. Let's examine it. Let's get deep, and let's make him proud. Enjoy conversation number 2 with God's comic Brad Stein and ObjectivelyDan. Well, thank you so much again for coming to Brad Stein Has Issues. And folks, this is a very special guest, and I'll tell you why. First off, this special guest is doing something rare. I've had 3.5 years, I think, of a podcast, and I think I've only had maybe 2 or 3 guests ever that I've done a part 2. Not that I don't like those guests or don't want to be with those guests. Some of them are brilliant. But, you do a guy, you leave him alone, and maybe you do it down the road. But this was a really interesting conversation, and it was really something I was so excited to do, because it's been gnawing at me for years and years and years. I wanted to talk to an atheist and talk about their perspective and how they see the world, and really go over some ideas about what I think make it untenable. And whether you agree with that at the end of this conversation or not, or my position doesn't hold water, oh, well, interesting conversation. That's good enough. But hopefully it will provoke thought because, man, isn't that what's fun about being human? Is you're trying to find some interesting things that maybe you didn't see before until somebody provoked it. So please welcome a man who graciously reached out to me first and has come back for round 2. So I guess I wasn't too miserable with him. ObjectivelyDan is back with us, my atheist friend. How do you do, sir?
Brett, I'm great. Thanks for asking. And yeah, happy to come back for round 2. Let's see what you got for me.
Okay. Well, listen, I do want to set it up a little bit, if I can, from last week, from last week, because here's the deal. When I first did my interview with William Lane Craig, I was really trying to discover some flaws I felt, some defeaters, so to speak, in an atheist philosophy. But I didn't have a way to do that without going to somebody that at least understands the arguments. And certainly William Lane Craig knows the arguments, so nobody will question that. But it's not the same. It's not the same as an actual guy who might feel like they're misrepresented or might at least have another approach that give me pause or keep me on my toes, which is fine with me. That's what makes for an interesting conversation. And so you reached out, and I'm just kind of bringing people back up to speed in case they didn't hear the first one, and said, hey, I'll play. Let's give it a roll. And so you were very gracious to do that. But before we start the next phase, I do want to really emphasize to anybody listening, anybody watching, and to you, is I really do appreciate your willingness to do this, because I made something very clear the first time. I said, this is kind of a trial. It's kind of an experiment, because I feel like there's a way that I want to approach this I feel like is a little bit different than what you typically see in an atheist-theist engagement. And I just felt like it might make for a more interesting viewership, that it might give it more intrigue. Now, maybe I'm wrong. Maybe I'm not doing anything that incredibly unique. You have your own show where you talk to atheists and theists and whatnot, polytheists, who knows, everything. So maybe there was nothing that I approached that was that much different than things you've come across over the years. I don't know. But the one thing that I felt I needed to really experiment with was trying to hold the atheist view accountable to things that I feel like it doesn't have any justification. That's what I was trying to get at, and to see if there was a way to overcome that objection, or if in fact you could actually turn around and say, well, really, that's my problem as the theist, or perhaps there's more burden of proof necessary from my point of view. That's not what I believe. I believe that it's all falls on the atheist. But, and I'm sorry for this long introduction, but it's very important, and I'll tell you why. Because I don't want to be insulting. I don't want to be, I don't want to be dismissive or feel arrogant. I don't mean it like that. And my concern is that I would ever just come across like not a very good representative of my faith. And you were very gracious. Say, dude, I've heard everything, so I'm not afraid of anything you want to bring my way. I'm not going to get offended. But there were a couple times when you did. And so I'm like, okay, so I got to reevaluate. Either A, did he not see why that kind of got him a little off kilter, and that, in fact, it's kind of perhaps his own coming to grips with something that he doesn't know how to manage? Or, was I just kind of maybe mean-spirited about it, or in some ways not very gracious? And that's what I'm still experimenting with. And so I decided to call this, and you're my guinea pig, as I said before, the Atheist Experiment. That's what these are going to be, because if ours gets some traction, and most of the time when I've seen Christians and atheists go at it on social, it gets a lot of response. So it does seem that there's a community of folks out there that really like these discussions and really get involved in them. So I really wanted to see if I could continue this hard-hitting perspective that holds you accountable but hopefully at the end still be, look, we're respecting each other, but we've given each other this right to approach it this vigorously and this aggressively, because that's what I think is necessary that will make it unique. So sorry for the long-winded preface. By the way, is there anything about that maybe from the first time that you'd want to maybe think about, or even how I set this up, if there's any addendum you'd like to add to that or anything that
Sure. Yeah. Well, you used the word offended. I wouldn't say offended. I definitely got frustrated, I think, from our first time talking to you, just because I can only be told so many times that I'm supposed to believe my life doesn't have meaning by somebody else. You know what I mean? Okay. And so we kind of hit on that point a little bit and a few other things. But, when it comes to having conversations with people, and I have conversations with people at least once a week, on my call-in show, people want to be heard, even if they're wrong. Right. So the biggest complaint that you'll hear from people who don't, and I know the people who have been on the show or have done other call-in shows, that you hear from people who call in is, well, wait, you're cutting me off. Wait, I want to be heard. And I'm not saying that you necessarily did any of that, but more to the point of, when it comes to people's personal beliefs and personal convictions, people don't want to be told what they think. People would rather express it in their own words. So I think think that's, a hard thing to do when you're trying to, you're interested in making a point to me, right? Yes. And at the same time, you're also kind of interviewing me, so you have a tough act of balance. Yeah. I think that's what you have to figure out with the experiment here. How to do that.
Well, again, and maybe ironically, you're providential, because it needed an atheist that had a temperament, and I think I mentioned this last time, that can kind of go with the flow. Because the truth is, and you know this because you're in that community, there are people, just like in my Christian faith, on the internet that are not good representatives of your belief. They're just not. They're cruel, they're dismissive, they're antagonistic, they're mean-spirited, and oftentimes, frankly, Dan, they're not real smart. They're not real good at this. They're just they just enjoy hurting people and feeling better about themselves. And I'm being very forthright. And there's Christians that do the same thing. So this isn't like, oh, we've got it down. We don't. But the only way this will have any value is if two guys actually are smart enough to try to dig in and see if there's something to find here, because otherwise, what's the point? So let me see if I can try to start over again. I apologize if I revisit some of the things. I don't remember because we had a fairly long conversation. But I definitely am going to get to the particular thing about the meaninglessness, which I think is, to me, a big crux of what I think has to be grappled with if this conversation has any redeeming value. And so I think what I said to you at one point, and maybe it was misunderstood or felt insulting as opposed to a declarative statement, but that's what I meant. So for anybody listening, anybody watching, keep in mind, I am a Christian. I do understand I'm trying to be kind to people and loving and winsome, but I ain't no William Langford. I'm not John Lennox. I don't have those temperaments of these very kind guys. I'm a comic. I'm a little bit more aggressive and whatever. But Dan is accepting that. He said it's kind of like we're playing a game. So he's accepting the rules of this game, as opposed to it being this very sweet little, repartee that we're trying to do with folks watching in the audience. I really would see it as a video game in a way, or I don't know. Anyways, let's just see it once again if we can get somewhere, and if not, at least we gave it the old college try. So I guess let me. I could either find some different questions that will just be interesting, but I think I'm defeating the purpose, but I think I'll do that anyways. I just want to ask you a question and get your take, and this time see if I can be a little bit more, make sure that you are at least elucidated your point, and make sure that at least we hear it. But I am going to come back aggressively, because I feel like that is a missing component to this. I will demand clarity. I will demand consistency, and you certainly have the right to do that to me. So it's not like it's a one-way street. So let's start with the whole idea of meaning. That's really what this whole thing, crux of what I believe is just an impossible concept to overcome, and not just for atheists, for anyone. And that is, if there is no intrinsic teleology within the universe that humans have access to and understand as true, then nothing we do has any purpose. It's like we're playing a game. It's like we're in a dream, but there really is. We're in a matrix. We're really not controlling any of this, and there's really nowhere to end because we have no autonomy. Now, I know this was something we went over quite a lot last time, but I feel like it needs to be I feel like you need to give me this answer. And that's when I told you that I felt like atheists don't understand this, and you took umbrage to that. And I didn't mean it like you're not smart enough. You're a very smart guy. What I meant was, I don't think you understand that you're being inconsistent by finding meaning in something that you believe doesn't have it intrinsically. I tried to make that point before. I guess we're going to go back into it. But help me understand. And then I'm going to give you the floor, brother, because I talked a lot.
Yeah.
So my premise is, if there is no engineer, no game maker, no meta narrative, a design in nature by which humans have access to and thus are trying to get somewhere at the end, if this is all arbitrary and accidental, I don't understand how anything you do, anything, can have any actual volition and value, because it's all within the illusion of this game that has no purpose. All right, go ahead.
Yeah, for sure. So meeting's an interesting one. It comes up a lot. I think I mentioned that before last time we talked about this. I really like a guy named David Benatar's take on this. He's a South African philosopher, and he has a book called The Human Predicament. So he talks about meaning in this book, and he basically breaks meaning down into 3 different categories. Okay, so there's meaning on a cosmic scale, meaning in a social scale, society scale, and then meaning to the individual. Okay. And so David Benatar is also not a theist. He doesn't have any theistic conceptions, as far as I'm aware. And he talks about, as far as the cosmic stuff goes, we really can't account for that, right? I can't really give myself meaning on a sense of a scale so grand. And most people, I mean, no person on earth ever will.
But when you say in a cosmic, just so I get clarity, so when you say in the cosmic sense, are you referencing the way I frame it, which is the meta narrative, the actual sort of purpose of the whole game, and then inside of that game is us doing our little individual things? But is that what you're right? Because if that's what
maybe a little bit different, maybe a little different, because I'm talking about on a universal scale. I'm not talking about just happening on planet Earth. I'm talking about everywhere, right? Okay. There's nothing to be gleaned from that, as far as we can tell, right? But that there's a next level in there too, right? Which is that social meaning, right? And even then, on the societal level, very few humans get to impact history the way that some people have. Like, that we look at some people from the history books, sort of this great man idea of history, right? Of how they've influenced people and influenced history, influenced cultures, civilizations. And that's a very, 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 very small subset of the human population. So he kind of looks at that and says, what do you do? Well, you kind of have to look at the individual meaning, right? And that comes from what we put it to the table, what we bring ourselves. And he also points out that it doesn't have to be one specific thing. There's kind of this idea that we're kind of all created for a purpose. We all have to fulfill that specific purpose. But from my point of view, from a point of view of somebody that doesn't have a God belief, it's not necessarily clear that I have to be doing one specific thing or focus on one specific thing. I'm a husband now. I'm a project manager at work, and I have my own show. I have a lot of different roles that I fulfill in my life, and all of those things give me meaning in some way. And they don't have to be, like I said, cosmically linked. They don't even have to be linked to the broader society as a whole, although I try to do activist work and I try to, try to improve the well-being of others as much as I can. But yeah, in terms of what the Christian claim is, which is this idea that we can have something greater beyond ourselves from a higher power that's God ordained, I can't claim that I have that, and I don't think I ever can.
You mean you can't have it as in personally, or you mean you can't claim that that actually exists, that that's actually a truth?
Well, both. Yeah,
Okay.
both.
Okay. So if that's what you're saying that this guy has tried to do is and let me make sure, I want to try to learn from the first time that I'm not putting your words in your mouth. So I want to revisit to make sure that I got it square. So he is saying there is no big meaning. There is no ultimate meaning. There is no designer. There's no one who started the engine. There's no one who put the game into play. That is, if the universe is cold, dark, black, huge, mage, and there's nothing out there, and we lucked out and became self-aware. So is that what his premise is? There is no
More
ultimate.
or less.
Okay.
More or less, yeah.
And then he takes that. Oh, he says so. Since we know that there is no reason to be here, we have to just reject that as even worth consideration. Let's bring it down to a smaller level that we can manage. And what is the second thing he said?
Yeah, the second level, talking about the social level, right? The societal level.
So that would be the meaning in how do we interact with fellow humans, what we might do in a good
Precisely.
or bad way. And that gives us meaning because we're participating in human flourishing, and we're participating in trying to bring the most good and the least amount of harm to the most amount of people. And in that we can find meaning. Is that what he's saying?
Yeah, more or less, yeah.
Okay. And then the third one is the intimate, personal. Here's what I like. I love chess, and so that is meaningful to me. And I love ham sandwiches, so that to me is meaningful. I know it's no big deal to you, but to me, that's a big deal. And I love the baseball games, and I love my wife, and she's not yours, she's mine, but it's a big deal to me, and I feel it, and that's enough. So, yeah, I know that when I vanish, and die, I have no awareness, so it's as though it never took place. But since I'm here, I might as well find some pleasure and enjoyment and let that be enough, because I really have no option. There is no other answer. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, Brad, you got it. You got it. Absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah.
So okay. So this is the premise that I really want to hold your feet to the fire on, because it's where I feel, and I said this to you before, and you said, well, that was kind of offensive, and I guess it was maybe the way you felt I wasn't listening to you, so let me revisit it. But so my premise is exactly what he described, and I'm saying to you, then you are living a delusion. Now, I understand, I'm not saying you don't feel good about your wife. I'm not saying you don't have real subjective feelings. So I'm not denying you feel things and you equate them to say, this is good. With my wife, I'm eating cake. This is good. Ooh, I stepped on a rock, a bee stung me. That's bad because it hurts. So you have an objective preference to how you feel things, and in that you give a category distinction. That's good because it feels pleasure. That's bad because it doesn't. Is that accurate?
Well, you say that I'm living a delusion. I don't really understand why you chose to use that word.
Okay, here's why. Because the only way if atheism is true, and it could be, there's no God. We don't really know if we judge God and equate what the humans are used to in proving something is true, like in the scientific method. Of course, you can't find God in the scientific method because he's not material, but if we say God, I die and then suddenly I'm in heaven and there's God's like, well, there it is. Okay. Can't argue with that. I'm there. Or I go unconscious. But what I tried to reference to you was this analogy I made, this metaphor I made about if a guy was in an elevator with a bunch of people and the elevator snapped and he's plummeting in the ground, they all know they're about to be annihilated. And the guy suddenly goes, ooh, I figured out the cure for cancer. And he tells everybody, and they're like, oh my God, you're right. You did it. Okay, we're about to die, but at least that was meaningful, dude. You came up with that's amazing. Boom. It wasn't meaningful. If it can't remain, if it ceases to be part of a cognitive experience, which is what's about to happen one day, all humanity will be gone. then it's like this never happened. Because nobody can reference it. Nobody talks about it. There's no books to be said. There's no consciousness out there to reference. Yes, there was a people once that lived there, but they're gone. It's gone. So for all intents and purposes, Dan, it never happened. Because there's nobody there to reference it. So that's what I mean by delusion. You are pretending that it has value, but you're just trying to get through life functionally because, frankly, it's a horror show and a nightmare that this chemicals and this composite of molecules became self-aware to realize, holy crap, I'm going to die and it's forever. What was the point of this cognizance? What a frickin' nightmare.
I mean, that's a very pessimistic outlook, I would say.
It's not pessimistic because it's true.
Well, that's what a pessimist would say, right? Right. That, it has to be true because it's anyway, I think that is a valid interpretation. You could say, oh, this doesn't matter because it's not permanent, right? But more
than that, though, Dan. It's more than that. And this, I hope we can dig in here because I really feel like this is the part that I find atheists can't grasp. And I said that to you last time, and you got a little offended, like I was saying you're not smart enough. But I really believe this is true, and I hope we can figure this out. When you have decided to eliminate the possibility that there is something beyond all this that lasts forever, when you've eliminated that as access, your only recourse is to observe what you get and act as though it has meaning. But once you don't exist, Dan, none of these things that you felt there is no pessimism because there's nothing to reference that word. There's no optimism. There's no joy. There's no sex. There's no children. There's no food. There's no good. There's no bad. There is nothing.
Yeah. Well, that's going to be way farther in the future after I'm gone, right?
But we're
you're talking
all
about
going
after
down
humans are gone.
But at the heat death of the universe, yeah, but that's coming. Coming.
Oh, for sure. No, again, but I'm not delusional about that though, Brad. Like that's the thing. I understand that.
Okay. Okay. All right. Now that's a good point what you just said, because I think that helped clarify where I felt like there was a miscommunication. You're saying now, I think, and again, I'll let you tell me what you're saying is, no, I'm not delusional. I admit it. I'm going to die and I'm eternally unconscious as though I never existed. Are you admitting that?
I mean, I don't know. Again, maybe there's an afterlife. If there is, I don't have good reason to believe it. So I choose to live my life in a way where I probably don't have one. Right. Okay. So,
but do you understand? But can you understand what I'm trying to get at? Is that you function, and when I say humanity, when you function to find some kind of joy, pleasure, meaning in the little moment you have of existence, and existence only has any kind of validity, Dan, if you're aware of it. If there's an awareness, it's here. Worms aren't contemplating Homer, okay? Bees aren't doing poetry, right? The trees aren't making orchestras. They don't care. They just do. They live and they die, and that's that. Well, your perspective as an atheist, we're in the same category. But we made this horrible blunder of material that was aware of itself and goes, holy smoke, I'm here and I'd rather stay here, but now I'm going to vanish and I'll never know I was here. And I have to pretend like the little joys I get along the way are worth it because because the realization that one day I simply cease to exist is too much to bear. Now, I suppose you could say, well, what difference does it make? You're unconscious, so you don't really care. But while we're here, for thousands of years, humans have had this conversation because it has, because there's something about it that we are compelled to explore. No, there's something else. Why would a determined physical being ever reach a point where they felt like they needed to survive, that survival was more important than not survival, because that's the driving engine of neo-Darwinism, right? Survival. But we don't survive. Nothing survives. So it's a fraud played on itself to keep making more things that aren't going to survive. That's what I mean by delusion. I know you're admitting it, but to pretend like admitting it gives you some solace is a
well, I'm not pretending like I am admitting it. I am admitting that yes, life is not permanent. I think your conception of meaning seems to be really tied with this idea that there has to be some part of me that has to keep existing. Otherwise, everything I do is meaningless. And I'm really curious as to why that is, because I just don't see it that way. Movies end all the time. That doesn't mean that they weren't meaningful to watch, right? I mean, people come and go and contribute the things that they contribute, but their contributions still matter to other people at large. I guess you would say, well, everybody's going to die at the end. Sure, that's true. But I mean, like you said, I'm going to be unconscious at that point. I presumably won't have any judgment at that point. So I'm not sure if it's going to change too much of my outlook there, if it all washes out, even in the end. But
well, I mean, I hope you understand and make sure I hope you realize where I'm going with this. If atheism is true, I admit it. We disappear and we don't know we're here. So this little conversation is irrelevant because I'm not here to ponder.
Again, in a grand universal sense, yes, but Brad, that's just not how I see meaning all the time. I see meaning in the daily interactions I have with people.
I know.
I really do.
I know you do. And so do I. And so do I. The difference is, and this is, I don't know if we'll ever overcome this hill, because I think you find satisfaction in saying, hey, I wish I lived forever. I don't. So whatever I get here, I'll just enjoy it. Once I die, it won't matter anyways. So whatever. What difference does it make? I'll just enjoy what I got and let that be enough. Well, you have no option. You have no option. You're going to die. I'm going to die.
That's true.
So I think what you maybe are presuming I'm getting at is, if there's nothing that lasts beyond it, then it's not worth finding value or some interest in relationship while at least you're around. You might as well eat, drink, and be married. Tomorrow you die. You might as well. I mean, why not? But I guess what I'm getting at is, I once heard Penn Jillette talk about, are you afraid of death? He goes, well, are you afraid of 1825? No, why? Well, neither am I, because I wasn't there. So what difference did it make? So no, when I die, I just vanish. So I was never really here, at least from my angle, because I don't know it anymore. So it was like nothing happened, and I'm not worried about it. I'm not in hell. I'm not in heaven. I'm not in purgatory. I just never was, because there's no me to remember. I guarantee you there was some guy 300 years ago in some village in France that was a nice man and cobbled shoes for the orphans and did all these wonderful things. Said, well, at least I did that. No, you don't know him. I don't know him. He's in some unmarked grave somewhere. Nobody met. It didn't matter. So that's, I think, what I'm exploring with you, Dan, is your need to find to try to convince yourself that I'll just take what I can get and just accept that as enough because I have no option. To me, is a delusion if you never knew it occurred. And that's what I'm getting at. So I know it sounds a little...
You had me right till the end there.
Okay.
I don't know what you mean by that last sentence you said.
So I'm trying to make sure you understand that I certainly agree that you should enjoy the life you have and that the little things are wonderful. But I don't. But I guess what I'm saying is, But that only, man. How do I figure this out? Because it is to me an intellectual experience of like a mind game. Is that if I know I'm no longer Okay, so if I know one day I will never remember any of the experiences.
Here, yeah. Can I help you out here? Maybe can I ask
Please.
what is it?
Yeah.
Is it? So here's what I would ask. Okay, it sounds like my life needs to have meaning in this way. Like it needs to have the French cobblestone maker from 300 years ago. His life doesn't have meaning in your conception of this.
Well, we don't remember it. We don't know he was here. So
Okay,
at the time,
but you're saying he doesn't have that. He just doesn't have it, right? But why should he need that? I guess like what? Because is there something that's lacking here? That I mean, yeah, obviously the lacking is there's no bigger picture, right?
So
But like, does he need it though?
I think we're at an impasse is that you and let's figure this out because this is the part I want to see if there's any answer from an atheist. This is what I'm trying to discover. So it does get a little cloudy because I am saying to you, I am not saying to you that since I'm going to die, I shouldn't enjoy the things that I have while I'm alive. That's not what I'm saying.
Okay.
So, and I think that's what you're referring to is you think I'm saying if I don't get to remember this forever, then why remember it at all, or why find any joy in it?
Yeah.
That's not what I'm saying.
Okay.
Because you and I are on the same path, right? We live. We're cognizant. We're seeking truth, hopefully. We're trying to be nice to each other, blah, 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 blah. But we're both going to die. And when we do, the only belief system that is consistently allowing the experiences I have now to actually be meaningful and not be an illusion is the theistic, not just because I'm in heaven, because frankly, Dan, I don't think I'm going to be in heaven worrying about this podcast or thinking about the wonderful time I had on earth, because heaven's going to be so much better. This is irrelevant too. What I'm getting at is without meaning existing forever, the meaning that we think we're experiencing now isn't. It's an illusion. Okay. It's no different than if I was a bug living and dying and never knew I was here even while I was alive. So that's what I'm saying is that is an illusion that you accept because you have no option, but it is not objectively meaningful.
Okay. I see what you're putting down here. So let me figure this out with you then. So presumably, you will die one day, like you said. And you'll
There's no presumable. I'm going to die.
Well, okay, sure. Right. Unless we figure out some sort of technology, I don't know, probably not going to happen. But you know what I'm saying? You're going to die one day and you go to heaven afterwards. Why at that point, the ability to go on and live, well, I guess live, I don't know if it's living, you know what I mean? Exist, I guess, be conscious, have awareness. Why does that mean that your life has meaning and mine doesn't? What precludes me from having meaning from my point of view, but yours does?
Okay, yeah. Well, I think the first problem with that conceptualization is it feels like it's personal.
I'm not trying to make it personal, Brad.
No, I don't mean that. I don't mean that
at all. I'm trying to understand like what makes the eternal life thing. What makes that meaningful, but me not having eternal life, or anybody not having eternal life, not meaningful? That's what I'm trying to understand.
Okay, so that is the question that I'm grappling with here, and so. Okay, so here's what I'm getting at. And
I appreciate you saying that, by the way. I understand. It's not personal. I'm just using me as an example there. So go ahead.
Right. Yeah. No, and what I meant by that, though, is because you're saying, well, how come just because you believe in God, you get meaning? And
I'm not trying to put you like that. I realize the wording came across that way. That's not what I meant.
No, and I don't mind. Frankly, I'm glad you said it because I think it's important that we delineate that for people listening because because here's what I'm and maybe it took this long to try to make sense of what I'm at least what I'm getting at, whether you accept the premise or not. At least we understand it, and that's important. I think that's kind of what the atheist is seeing. He's saying, "Listen, I'm having meaning. I accept I'm going to die. I wish I didn't, but you're having meaning. But you're saying I live forever. So thus, you get to have meaning, but I don't. Well, we're both experiencing kind of the same stuff in the same world of three-dimensional biology, and then we disappear." So mine is meaningful, yours is meaningful, and and I'm very content with that as an atheist to say this is enough. I accept that it's no more. And that's that. And so you really, who are you to tell me this isn't meaningful? And so I think the answer that I should have said, or at least we're finding, is I'm not saying your life isn't meaningful as an atheist. I'm saying life in general isn't meaning at all, including mine, in my thinking there's a God on the other side of this. Because if I go into internal unconsciousness, I also am stuck in a game that has no purpose. We're material that became aware. That's the problem. Once we became self-aware, once we were able to draw conclusions, to have inductive and deductive reason. Once we, in immaterial thoughts, had substance in some odd metaphysical way, that meant there was more to this than just to exist and eat and crap and sleep and die. No, we all want more. But if we were truly products of simply instrumental aberrations of molecular structures that once in a while have some hybrid that comes out of some mistake, and we're just existing, but eventually we go into non-existence. If that's all we are, then we really are no different than a mollusk or a radish or a rock. We're no different. We just somehow are the only ones that are contemplating, why am I here and why do I have to leave because I don't want to? It seems to me Darwinism should never have allowed us, like it didn't with bugs and animals and whatnot, to be self-aware and live in this angst, this horrific nightmare that I can't get out of. I'm going to not be. And why did I have to know about that? Couldn't I just live a life like the cattle and go have sex with what I wanted and ate the grass and made money? And that was, why couldn't you just left me there?
Some people I meet, they kind of act like that. You know what I'm saying? I'm just kidding, Brad. I'm just kidding. No, I get it. I get it. You and I, we're cut from the same cloth in the sense that we enjoy trying to find a bigger picture, right? Trying to find something greater. Not every person is interested in that kind of pursuit.
Right.
But for you and me, this stuff matters because we want to figure this out. What am I doing here? How's my trajectory in life going to make any sense unless it's following something, right? And you do mention this sort of existential horror that comes with consciousness. Because I agree, there is a sort of horror that comes to it when you realize your body is a body and made of stuff, just like the other kinds of stuff that you see, right? And you're pretty radical with your pointing out how we're no different from rocks and things. I think there's a little bit of difference, but I substantively, right? If we're talking about material things, and that they're made of material, we're made of material, sure, right? And how do you get over that? How do you get around that? I think that's something that I grapple with all the time. And I think a lot of people grapple with that.
Well, and so I guess, but here's what I'm trying to really see if I can tease out of this conversation. Otherwise, we're just having another debate with an atheist and a Christian, or at least a contemplation, whether this is a debate or not. But I think that to me, every second is God and a proof of God, everything. But you have to train yourself and choose to see it that way. And we have the ability to say no. I made an illusion, for example. I created a show called The God Experience. I don't know if I mentioned it last time, where I use my sleight of hand and everything that I used to be a magician to just have an interesting, almost TED Talk meets David Blaine about life and meaning and God and proofs of God. And I use these sort of sleight of hand things just to make it interesting and fun and so forth and so on. But one of the things that I referenced, and this is kind of in keeping with what we were just discussing, but I think it lends itself to a continued inconsistency that I see with the atheist. For example, if if science is all science isn't even anything. Scientists are people that just use a method to try to observe the natural order of things. So there is no science doesn't teach me anything. Scientists do, because they're the only ones that can think. So if I look at a beautiful mountain range and you look at it and you're the atheist and I'm the theist, and I say, oh my, that is so gorgeous. That is so beautiful. Well, it isn't. It's a pile of dirt, Dan.
But Brad, see, I think that's your opinion, though. I think maybe that's where we get into some differences, because, yeah, you can conceive of a worldview in which, yeah, this isn't beautiful. This is just a pile of dirt. But you know what? To some people, pile of dirts are beautiful. That's one of the best things about being human. There's a lot of terrible things about being human, as you've already alluded to. But one of the best things is our differences in perspective can sometimes make us see the world differently, and sometimes in a beautiful way. It really can. I don't think we have to be nihilistic about everyday things. Sometimes it's appropriate, but sometimes you can just enjoy life for what it is without that burden. Not every day has to be a contemplation of my physical body is going to decay one day. Sometimes it can just be, I'm enjoying my time with my wife, and that's special. And maybe that's all it needs to be. Maybe it doesn't.
Well, we're kind of back to square one, and I think we've already kind of trodden that path of why I said, and again, it's a little nuanced. Because like I said, I'm not denying that time with your life isn't fun. It is.
Yeah.
So I'm not ever saying that. What I'm saying is,
you're saying it's objective, that it's just a pile of rocks. You're saying there's something
that's true,
more,
though. That's true. It's I don't know. I mean, maybe you were being flippant, or maybe you were being artistic in saying that some people look at a pile of mud and see it beautiful. I don't know that anybody really does, but I suppose maybe there's a guy.
I know some paleontologists that might beg to differ.
Okay.
I know some geologists that might beg to differ. I don't know. I mean, I haven't asked them. Maybe they think it's just a pile of mud too. Yeah. But I'm just saying, people who study in these particular fields, they have these expertise. Sometimes they do see things a bit differently.
Okay, but this would go back to my initial bedrock premise. If they did see beauty in mud, if they did, there would have to be some deeper meaning. It's because when I dig in there, I'm going to find a fossil. The reason I like that is because inside of that, I'm going to be able to build a brick and make a hut. So they see an instrumental value to it. They see some other ulterior, deeper meaning. They don't just look at mud and say, beauty. More than likely, there's a function to it that they will ascribe deeper meaning. Because what I'm getting at is, what is it about looking at the Rocky Mountains or the Himalayas that takes your breath away? It does. It's way more than just what a giant pile of rocks.
Yeah, definitely.
Well,
well, I'm not thinking. Well, Brad, I'm looking at the Rockies. I haven't seen the Himalayas, but I've seen the Rockies, and I'm saying, geez, this is amazing. This is awesome. I'm having those connections too, and you're right. It is because you can kind of see the majesty of things. You ever been to the Grand Canyon? Same way. I've been to the Grand Canyon.
Now, so here's my point, and maybe this will be an interesting interlude. So you said the word majesty. There is a majesty to this, or to the Grand Canyon. Now, let's be very honest. The Grand Canyon is a big hole.
Have you been to the Grand Canyon? It's definitely not a hole. It's a canyon.
Okay, but you get my gist. My gist is that it's a big hole carved in. Look, it's beautiful. I've seen it. Yes. Now, what I'm getting at though is, if you're just being very analytical, what is so beautiful about a carved out path in rock? But like you said, even as I look at you, you're going, no, there's something amazing and beautiful. And
you can do both. I'm not saying you can't be analytical.
But my premise is this: what you're experiencing, and you use the word majesty at mountains, to me is God. That's exactly what my point is. That is God going, Dan, objectively, Dan, look at this and try to deal with it. And you go, and you go, see, Here I am. And you go, nah, it's not you. It's just me deciding that big things are better than small things. And larger holes are more beautiful than smaller holes. I think what I'm saying is, I think it's God's tapping you on the shoulders and you're ignoring him, saying, nope, it's just me deciding this is majestic and thus I'm going to give it.
I think I can have contemplation and realizing I'm a smaller thing and part of a larger system without God. I don't know that. I mean, listen, I'll be honest, Brad. If it's God talking to me, he's not doing a very good job communicating and making that clear to me. Okay, because he hasn't told me that information himself. You know what I'm saying? Like, you could interpret that as God. I would say, why interpret that as God? Why not just see again, like,
because I'll tell you
we're
what,
part of something bigger.
Because, and it goes back to my premise, and I'm always going to bring it back to that because I feel like you've certainly articulated your perspective, and there's nothing wrong with the way you've seen it. But I do still feel like, and I simply will not abandon the fact that you cannot justify any kind of greater meaning if you were never here to observe it. And that's what's going to happen at death. You were never here to observe it. And once
maybe we'll pause for a sec, because I don't know. I don't have to find meaning in looking at the Grand Canyon or looking at these beautiful things, because that's kind of separate from the experience of saying, wow, look at how amazing this is. I don't know that. I mean, certainly they're related, but like, I don't know, you have to have a grand sense of meaning or purpose in order to find those things beautiful. I
think it's so natural to you that you don't get it. You just see the beauty. You don't stop and question, why do I feel beauty? There's no beauty. Yeah, I mean, it's just my subjective taste. Maybe some people find beauty, serial killers find beauty in killing people. It's not beautiful. It's evil. It's terrible, but they find it fine. And in a world that there
But Brett, doesn't that kind of prove my point, though? Like what you just said about how serial killers may find beauty in killing, like how subjective that sense of beauty actually is. Because I'm sure you're not going to say God is whispering, telling the serial killer that this is actually beautiful and they're part of something bigger, right?
Right. But it's obviously a completely different category distinction, because I don't have to explain to you as an atheist that it's evil to kill humans. You know that. Now, there is no reason whatsoever that anybody should give a crap about somebody being killed. As long as I survive and I got food and I took his wife and I'm making people, I'm good, and I don't care what you think about it. And no, I'm not trying to protect your herd. And no, I'm not trying to flourish the human. I only care about me, and there's nothing you can do other than overcome my ability to be more powerful than you and demand that I retreat or kill me. You can't give me any and they're just.
Yeah, so I think that's the distinction. I could give you reasons, but you're looking for an objective reason, right? You're looking at, because I could say, oh, you should care because other people have feelings, for example. That's a reason, right? But that's not, that may not be something you care about. So your complaint is more, well, we don't have an objective reason for somebody not to do something unless you include God, right? Yeah. Is that kind of your?
So if you,
I'm just trying to understand.
Well, let's say you drop dead in the next 3 seconds. Would this conversation matter to you?
Well, to me, at that point, nothing's going to matter.
Right. Okay. Yeah. So did you accomplish or do anything? You, from your perspective? No, because you're not here. There is
again, from my perspective, I'm going to not have a perspective. So, yeah, I guess in that take, yeah. But, you're going to keep moving on. And my family's going to keep moving on, and the world's going to keep moving on,
And there until it disappears, and it's going
until it disappears. Yeah.
And that ultimately is coming right full circle back to what I'm saying, because every human, you said, well, what if we figure out a way to, save somebody's brain in a vat, or come a way to capture consciousness and put it in the internet or something, so
I didn't say that, but yeah, those are interesting.
What if that happens? You could say, I said, okay, maybe, but once the universe collapses on itself, which is coming. Now, yeah, it's billions of years or whatever. That's irrelevant. Once no human is left, no consciousness is left, we might have not done it. We might as well have not done any of this because there's nobody here to think it through. It didn't happen. It was irrelevant. It was a dream. It was an illusion. It was nothingness. And yet we live our lives like there is something more. Well, you know there isn't, Dan. You know there is nothing more. And yet you live your life like it's worth continually seeking the more. To me, that is a proof of God. The only rational reason that would be true is if you were designed for more. You were designed to seek meaning instead of stepping back as a good scientist and saying, screw it, I'm going to kill myself. What's the point? I'm going to die anyways. But you don't. And there's no reason for you to exist. And I'm just saying, I believe that's a meaning of God. I think that's part of how he talks to us. And it's esoteric. And it is not him splitting the sky and sticking his face out and saying, ta-da. It's part of how it works. And when those people who believe in God accept that there's another way to see. And listen, this ain't just Christians. Lots of religious folks or people of spiritual pursuits have tapped into this other thing, and I think the atheists just full stop reject those experiences as being valid, as being true. They're just some sort of
not just atheists, Christians also reject other spiritual experiences as being valid because they're not true pathways to God. I mean, how many Christians say, Jesus is the only way in the,
Well, no, I don't. I would disagree with you because I would say that the spiritual experience that others experience are spiritual experiences. They're not necessarily with Jesus. They're not necessarily with Yahweh, but they could be demonic experiences. And again, stuff you don't believe in. It's just absurd to you for me as an adult man to be acting as though this is true. But my point is, what if it is? What if the reason? Yeah,
but I'm sorry to interrupt you. I didn't mean to interrupt you, but I'm just thinking because before you were talking about these spiritual experiences as being meaningful for people, because they're encountering God in some way, but you also just to dismiss them as well. Not all of them are the good experiences. Some of them are demonic. Like, I don't know what you think of, say a Muslim's experience praying to God and maybe he received some sort of, revelation from that. I don't know if you would say that was God. I don't know if you'd say that was demonic or not. I think that's kind of part of the problem. Yeah. And that's one of the reasons why I choose to call myself an atheist, because there is sort of an inconsistency in revelation between what you interpret as an experience from God and what somebody else calls an experience from a demon, right? So until I get clarity on that, it's kind of hard for me to know, because I don't want you to deceive me when actually the God of some other religion could be true, right, Brad? Like I said, the Christianity is one of many religions that exist in the world. I know you see it as objective truth, but Muslims also see their religion as objective truth. Mormons do the same thing for themselves. So, there's some stuff that has to be figured out in that. And so I haven't found a good method of figuring out which one is the more real one, in that sense.
Well, I think my reference point, though, was not so much that, because obviously I believe Christ is the only human that's ever proven to be God. So, obviously I believe that is true because I believe there are things that are true in life. I think 2 + 2 is 4, whether you like it or not. And that means it is closed-minded. That means it is bigoted towards 2 + 2 is 5. Nope. Sorry. I don't care what other mathematical folks think. This is the truth. And so that it's not even an apology towards Christianity or Christ as much as what I was getting at was the idea that there are other humans that have had access to another experience that seems to be immaterial. That to me is either a way for God to say, well, now at least there's really something else. So keep looking, or or God, or there are demons that are trying to fool you into the other thing. It's more about a reference point to something beyond the material world is what I was referencing.
No, I get what you're saying now, and I see that, and I think that's really interesting because I would almost cite that as evidence for my position instead. And here's why I would say that. Because I actually think that the commonality of human experiences, right, despite the deep, deep differences and divides that come with the orthodoxy of those individual experiences, there still seems to be a commonality with that. And that kind of makes me think, well, what if this is just something that's inherent to being a person and less has to deal with something that's actually beyond ourselves, right? If people from India can have spiritual experiences, if people from China can have spiritual experiences, maybe this is more about being a person than it is about anything beyond ourselves. What do you think about that idea?
You mean that the spiritual experiences are some sort of delusion or some sort of hallucinatory element of our brain that has fooled us into thinking there's something
else? It could be delusion. It could be hallucination. But just like we were talking about experiencing the Grand Canyon earlier and how amazing that is, I don't necessarily call that a delusion. I just think that's a human moment. You know, I just think that that's just realizing that there is something bigger beyond yourself, and it doesn't have to be in a spiritual sense. Sometimes it's just being in the world, you know?
Yeah, I guess that I'm coming to a part of this conversation where I don't know if I was successful in able to articulate why I felt like it all it's all on the foundation of having a transcendent meaning is the only thing that would make any of this have it would account for why I would see mountain ranges and be in awe. It would account for why I look at the light refraction through dust particles in the sky that make colors, and all it is like going through a prism. It's no big deal, and yet I will fall to my face and weep. This is what people have done, and we now know scientifically some of the principles that naturally allow some of these phenomenon to occur, and yet with that knowledge, we still circumvent our suspension of disbelief and say, no, it's more, and that is God. That's how God tells us he's here. That's what he does. That's what makes it make sense. And I believe that only my belief system at least can logically give some coherence to this phenomenon that yours doesn't. Yours is simply to allow you to experience it, find some human interest in this particular experience, I guess. I don't even know what the category distinction name would be. But you're saying, well, and a human sees it, somehow they find something interesting about it. It's just a feeling, I guess, a chemical reaction in my brain that somehow decides that mountain range is giving me a euphoria. There's no reason for it. It's all physically recognizable as a
well, there's a reason for it, but it's a physical reason, right? Like you know, if you encounter lust, there's physical reasons for that, right? And I think in the same way, one might experience beauty for similar reasons. There can be a chemical phenomenon behind that,
right? Yeah. Well, you have to believe that, I think. I think you have to believe it because there is no other option. Your brain is simply creating some kind of synapses to hopefully keep it surviving. Maybe it wants you to think that the mountain is beautiful because it wants you to go explore it and find something to eat. Maybe the brain is, I don't know. What I do know is it ain't beautiful. It's all a trick to try to survive because that's all. See, I'm pretending I'm an atheist now. That's all I got is survival. That's all I got is to try to keep going until I don't. I know I'm not going to survive, though. I know I'm not going to survive. So what am I hanging on to for 2 more days, 2 more months, 2 more years? Why? For what? For what? But I think, no, there's something sacred here. I'm telling you, Dan, it's God. That's how he tells us it's him. That's how it works. And those of us who then decide to take this leap, and it's not a jettisoning of your intellect. It is not dismissing your ability to reason and have cognitive logic and drawing conclusions to a deductive end. If this, then that. Which works, comports to reality. We get used to that pattern and think, it's going to be consistent. We can't account for why it's consistent, why the natural order worked. We don't know why, which means God, somebody put the means. So again, this isn't me trying to just dismiss your experiences. I feel like I'm trying to define your experiences as being sacred, spiritual. This is why I think the atheist misses, not because you're not as smart as the rest of us. Maybe you're smarter than the rest of us. But I think what you do is you've defined it as simply natural, and yet we instinctively feel like there's so much more to it. And to me, that's God telling you, Dan, it's me. It's me.
Yeah,
and I think that's where I'm trying to sort of find.
I think you've made a great point in elucidating that. I think at this point it's just a question of, and maybe this is the impasse, and maybe we do this for next time. If we do this again, I don't want to take up all your time, but I've quite enjoyed today. Is one of us is maybe defining this as material or having material origins. One of us is saying it's spiritual origins, right?
Yeah.
And maybe that's where we're at, and we need to figure out who's right and how.
Let me just give you because we are getting later, and thanks again for your time. And no, I'd love to have him. You might be my go-to atheist guy whenever we have some other discussions, because I love your countenance. You're a kind guy, and you're civil, and you're curious. You're not just dismissing. These are real important questions. They do matter. They do matter. Especially if there is an afterlife. Suddenly it's like, holy smoke, does it matter? So let me just ask you a couple more questions, just out of curiosity. I might have asked you this last time, but I'm going to do it again because I'm curious.
Okay.
What would be a more amazing discovery? That God exists or that he doesn't?
Ooh, amazing discovery. Well,
like if either one of those, like you could choose.
Yeah.
Dan, I'm giving you the right to say there is no God, and everybody saying goes, oh, it's true. Or Dan, there's God, the guy, the ultimate guy. And you say yes, and everybody believes. Which of those two do you think would be more a better result?
Either one's kind of terrifying, honestly. Because, a lot of people are going to be wrong about a lot of things, right? Whether either one's true. Amazing's a weird word to use because I don't know. I don't know the full implications of that. I'm going to be honest with you, Brad. I don't know if anyone's ever asked me that question before. I'd have to think about that.
Well, I guess I've had a similar question, Dan, where the scientists are searching for life on other planets, and we've had all of these scenarios about the alien, right? And it's always they always give it a very messianic, interestingly godlike qualities. They're smarter than us, they're better than us, they're always philanthropic, they're coming to Earth to make it better because we're trying to kill ourselves. So they always give it this very beautiful, special godlike redemptive quality to this alien. That's fine to make that leap, but I can't do it to God. That would be a bridge too far. But I've asked, and I'll ask you, what would be a better? Well, maybe it's hard to find the adjective, but if we could choose that we found an alien that was 200 light years away that found us, and we got to say there is another being. Or God.
Oh, so you choose between aliens or God,
right? So because they give aliens godlike qualities, he becomes a substitute for God. This other guy,
Well, now I'll be honest. I kind of want to ask you because, would aliens affect your theology, your worldview at all if we found intelligent life out there?
Intelligent life, like a virus on Pluto, or
not even virus. I'm talking let's say full sapien, walks on 2 feet, has 2 hands, life. You know what I mean?
I don't know, honestly. I mean, that's obviously an idea that I guess would be something you'd have to grapple with. I don't know, Dan. I think that
as a Christian, I feel like that would have been tough for me because you kind of have an idea that human beings are intrinsically special, that we kind of have a soul, and then Jesus came for us. But if there's another being out there that seems to exhibit at least similar levels of intelligence, you'd have to wonder, Well, does that mean
Well,
they have souls? Does that mean?
unless he comes down and says, "Oh, by the
Oh,
way,
by
guys,
the way,
you know
I'm here to
Jesus,"
save the Zenonians or whatever. I don't know. Maybe.
or the alien comes down and says, "Hey,
I joke about that, but there are some Christian theologians that have come to the conclusion that if aliens existed, Jesus really came to save everybody, including other life. I've
well,
heard
yeah,
people make that
and why
conclusion.
not? I mean, in
So,
some in some weird way, that unreached tribe in the middle of South America that's never seen another human are kind of that. They're another species. Well, they're humans, but it's almost like there is no. They're from another planet because they have no connection to the modern world. It would be a complete. It'd be like magic to them, and so there always has seemed to have been in all these tribes from all of humanity this intrinsic drive to something else, like I'm going to worship the rock thing, I'm going to worship this tree, like we were designed to know there's something out there that we are acquiescing to, that we are bowing to. Now, why would we do that? Why wouldn't we just say we're it? And of course, that's what an atheist kind of does do, is it's us, it's just us. So I'm good. But atheists have to believe in magic. That's one thing they have to believe, because they have to believe that dirt eventually became
Brad, that's a whole other conversation. We don't have time for that today,
Okay.
but I'm going to disagree with you there.
Okay. Well, we can have that conversation another time, but the idea that we exist, the idea that we think there's meaning, that we live like there's meaning, and the fact that even though this is where I guess I'll conclude, that atheists think that even though I'm going to vanish and none of the great things I've loved, from my children to my wife, to the food, to the wine, to the trips, to the sunsets, is going to vanish. I'll never know it was here. It's as though I never existed. It doesn't matter if I was Hitler. It doesn't matter if I was, Abraham Lincoln. It doesn't matter, because I don't know. So it's irrelevant. And I don't care what anybody thinks after I'm gone, because I don't have anything to worry about. And nobody lives like that. Nobody. We always somehow, even in pretending that all there is this, and yet it's meaningful, tells me there's something out there that is trying to remind us there's more to it than this. And the only ones that have even contemplated this are humans. None of the other species and living organisms have done that. None of them. And they're all in the same boat. But we have reached a level where our meat in our head can be distinctive from that and think about itself and be as though it's a subject-object distinction. And that's impossible unless there's a spirit, there's a soul. And that's why I'm a dualist, and that's where I think accounts for why we are able to think and reason and even live beyond our material world, because our thoughts are real and they're not material. So that to me is another proof of God. So I'd love to have talked to you about that, the idea of immaterial, because you did mention that some atheists do believe in that. I'd love to know what those things are. Maybe it is thoughts. It would have to be, because that's one of the categories that they fit. Okay, so why don't you, if there's anything you would want to ask me, maybe not, I'm not trying to put you on the spot, but if there's anything you would think you would like to make sure I clarify, or you think I missed it, or anything you'd want to ask me.
Gosh, Brad, there's a million things I want to ask you. I think we're out of time. I don't know. We're already an hour and 45 into this thing, Well, I would love to pick your brain about stuff.
I'm an open book. Ask me anything you want, and it's your turn to hold my feet to the fire if you want to. Yeah, I'm not trying to put you on the spot. Maybe there's nothing that interests you from my perspective.
I guess man, there's so many things we could go into, Brad, but we kind of, one thing that was great about our last conversation, I wish we explored more, and I guess I'll ask you now, was I kind of had, and this was an impromptu thought, but I thought about it afterwards, and I really did want to know your perspective more. This idea of sort of living forever, in the sense of having somewhere to go after you die, right? If that option was taken away from you, if God said you don't get to go to heaven and you do get to sort of, I guess banish out of existence. Let's call it that. So not going to Sheol, not going to hell, not going anywhere else, but this is it. You're the one person where you're not going to get anything else afterwards. Would you say that your life at that point wouldn't have meaning?
Well, again, I would say that, and maybe this is a helpful inquiry.
And this is me not making a point here. I'm trying to understand.
No, I know, but I think it's important because it's back to what I was premising and to launch this whole thing.
Yeah.
It is, would it have meaning? And to be honest with you, I think that is, I'm getting a little bit closer to the philosophical concept that I'm trying to unravel. Is if eventually no one is cognizant, then there's no meaning, because meaning can only exist if someone is there to experience it. That's the only reason it could have any definition. There has to be someone who can draw conclusions from it, that can experience it, that can say, I am in the midst of this, it's real, it's tangible, and it's happening to me. And if I'm not here to be able to articulate that or even be aware of it, then no, there's no meaning, because because meaning implies a mind, something that can not just experience it, but articulate it and rest in it. Like there's something that is worth the contemplation. And only humans have it. It's a weird, odd aberration that it puts us so night and day. One of the things I said in my show, I told you about the God Experience show, is, people will tell me, hey, we're nothing. We're just a speck on the earth. If you look at the size of the universe, how big it is, how many galaxies, how big, we are so irrelevant. Don't worry about it, man. Just whatever. You're nothing. And I said this. I said, you're right. The universe is unfathomably large. It is, my mind cannot wrap around how big, how many galaxies, how many suns, how many moons, whatever. And you keep going out there billion light years down the road. Yeah, we're kind of pretty much insignificant, this little Earth. The universe is enormous beyond numerical ways to even contemplate it, or to give it a ruler of space. It's so big. I said, but there's one thing the universe has never done. It has never stopped for a moment and contemplated me. I'm the only one that knows it's there, because I invented telescopes, and I put the Hubble out there, and I invented the ability to mark time. And
Brad Stein made that Hubble telescope. That's great.
Well, yeah. I didn't want to bring that up. I didn't want to bring it up because everybody starts patting me on the back. But I mean, humans, measured things that we wanted to know. We give length to the universe. It doesn't know it has length. It has no mind. We gave chemical compositions to stars and suns because we were able to break them apart with our telescopes and our abilities to find chemical components and so forth. We are the ones that can find amazement in light and nuclear fusion, or whatever you call the sun, whatever that's called. And all it is just an explosion, but somehow we think it's amazing. We give significance to something that doesn't know it's here. So to me, we are way bigger than the universe, because how can I not be bigger than something that doesn't even know it exists? And that's what God has said to us. I'm going to make something so big, so ridiculous, that you'll see when I talk about who I am. Now you get it. And yet, I'm going to become one of you. I love you. You matter. I'm going to personalize me. I'm going to participate. By the way, when you guys screwed up in the beginning, I could have just wiped out and made a new batch until you guys finally did it right. I didn't. I stuck with what I started with. I even decided to become one of you, and I'm going to die for you, and you are going to live forever. And trust me when I tell you, eye hath not seen, ear has not heard, or has entered in the hearts of man the things that God has prepared for those that love you. You think you can imagine what heaven is? You don't have the foggiest stinking idea what's coming, and it's all being given you shadows and moments of that through the Grand Canyon, through the sunset, through the mountains, through my wife's, through my family, through that glass of wine, through these experiences that seem to say there's more, and no human has ever abandoned it except the atheists. And even when they do, they still say there's something here. It's just this, but that's worth it too. To me, that's just sort of a abbreviated version of the big meta picture of meaning, which is what gives your meaning any place to land, because it's here for a minute. Well, listen, that was fun, man. I hope it was a little bit more digging in. I don't know. I
love this conversation, Brad. I really did. But I said an hour and 45. We were not talking that long. I did the math wrong. About an hour and 15 or 20 or whatever. Well, regardless, it was great. This was fantastic.
It was good. It's part of you're going to be my first atheist experiment. I hope I have more guys. I'm going to have to figure it out, Dan. You were very helpful because I needed to get some pushback. I needed to get, so I could see if I'm missing something, if it's flawed, if there's a defeater here, if something is just obviously not necessarily as significant as I thought. I don't know, but I don't want it to become redundant. If I keep saying the same thing over and over and I keep getting the same answers, I don't know that we're getting anywhere. So I really need to review what these are and see if I'm on to something. Matter of fact, let me ask you, you've do this all the time. Was there any moments in it that you found interesting or compelling, or maybe outside of what you're used to hearing, that you felt that gave you pause? I'm not saying suddenly you believe in God. I mean, was there anything that you said, oh, okay, there is something really intriguing there. I want to go look at that some more. I found a new angle I haven't seen before. Did anything like that show up? Or is this the same stuff you've heard, for however many years you've been doing your podcast?
Well, let me put it this way. I'm not going to say everything I heard today was completely brand new, but I do think that you have a beautiful way with pointing out why you find meaning in things, and I think that's a very compelling thing. I think on its own, and I see the value that your worldview gives you in that sense. So I'm not going to lie and say, oh, this is new stuff to me. Not everything really, but I'll give credit where credit is due. Is that you were consistent in your point of view with me, I think, and so I think that's really important when talking about these kinds of things. As we kind of mentioned last time we talked, there's some people, and certainly I was one of these kinds of Christians for a little bit, that you kind of believe in something and you don't really know why you believe it. You just kind of believe it and you try to figure things out. And we're all like that to some degree with various things, right? Yeah. But I think I can tell by the conviction in your voice that everything you've said to me was of utmost importance to you. And I think that's a really compelling thing.
Well, and thank you. Like I said, I hope it was interesting and not just the same old stuff you've heard a million times, because what's the point? There's a million of those out there. Like I said before, I have an obligation, man. I have an obligation. If I'm taking this seriously, then I got to act like it. Mm-hmm. If I believe this is true, then I need to act like it's true and not talk about it. If there is something greater than this, and I want people to go there, then Shame
Brad,
on
to your
me.
point, that's why I'm here. Sorry, I was interrupting you there.
No,
But,
but
you know, if Christianity is true, I would like to know that it's true.
yeah,
I want to be saved, right? I
right.
want to have a good relationship with the big
Yeah,
G, you
yeah,
know?
yeah,
So,
yeah.
you know, that I think
Do
there's
you
something to
ever
that.
feel?
So,
Do you ever feel any sense of concern? It maybe just for a moment. Do you ever feeling like, oh crap, what have I screwed up? Well, maybe there is a guy. I don't know. I don't know. Have you ever had any kind of hedging in that? And the reason I ask you is I also have a premise that once people no longer feel any sense of sin, any sense of wrongness, or even any sense of concern or dread, I
mhm.
think that's probably when God has said they're done. They can't come home because the Holy Spirit no longer has access. But I do think that. But if there are those even guys like you who tasted and rejected, if you have moments of kindling a little ember of maybe, but maybe. I think that's good because that's God saying, "Oh, I'm not done with Dan." So, do you ever have any? Because I've certainly had moments of doubt. So I'm not acting like So I'm just curious if you've ever had moments of doubt and wondered if maybe there is, maybe he really is out there.
Well, let me pontificate on this a little bit because when I was first sort of leaving the faith, and by leaving the faith, what I really mean is saying out loud, I don't believe in God anymore, right? Because I had doubts for at least a year, 2 years or so, and I was kind of going in and out. But when I was finally sort of being comfortable with my identity of not being a Christian anymore, I definitely had moments of panic and fear. I remember the first time I said it out loud, I had more than one dream that week that there was a bomb that was going to go off. And I had to say out loud that I was a Christian or accept God into my life, or else I was going to go to hell. I wasn't going to go to heaven, you know? So, there's a little bit of fear of hell that's involved with that, you know, a little bit of that sort of psychology. Do with that as you will. Right. But, you know, there's certainly some fear there at first. I think as I've grown older, and I'm also, you know, a little bit older, and I'm 29 right now, I'm about to be 30 in a few months. So, you know, I think settling more as an adult and figuring out my role in life and place in life and figuring out myself has kind of helped with some of that too. It's some of that anxiety. But I would say if you ask me in the past year, 2 years, do I ever think, oh man, maybe this Christianity stuff is real? I don't really give it that much thought in that sense. If your theory is right and that's just the Holy Spirit saying, oh, well, Dan's not worth it anymore, he's got to go. I don't know. I don't know what to say. I will say that other sorts of organized religious groups do tend to use similar modes of thinking. For example, the Mormons have the spear in the breast, I think is what they call it, the fire in the belly, where they're like, oh, you have to have this sorts of conviction, and that's what's telling you, that's, you know, the Holy Spirit talking to you. So they use that sort of imagery a lot. So it's not necessarily unique to Christianity when it comes to that idea.
Well, yeah, they call it burning in the bosom or something.
Yeah, burning in the bosom.
That's for them to. That's when they're trying to just, God, if you're real, then give me burning in the bosom, and that's obviously easily you could delude yourself. That's like a hypnosis almost.
Sure.
Listen, I was a magician. I told you this. You know, I understand cold reading. I understand delusion. I understand these games. I get it. So it's not like I'm some rube that hasn't thought through the other parts. But yeah, I don't think it would ever be God would say, Dan's worthless. What I'm saying is God will get. I think the greatest horror of hell for people that are there is that you realize you chose it. That it's not because God doesn't throw anybody into hell. I don't know where they came. Well, God wants to throw. He doesn't throw anybody in hell. People are heading to hell. He headed you off at the pass, and some people said not interested.
Well, let me ask you about that. So, do you think people who don't understand Christianity, and obviously like don't accept God because they don't know what God is really, I mean, are those people going to hell?
I don't know. The honest answer is I don't know. Here's what I do believe, and I'm not even saying it's theologically sound. I believe, I heard a guy say this once, but I think there's some truth to it. He said, Jesus Christ is the only way to God the Father, but maybe there's more than one way to Jesus.
Mm.
And I thought,
Okay.
well, that's interesting because
Yeah.
all the other beliefs want a piece of Jesus. We talked about this. Buddhists want to talk about Jesus as an enlightened Buddha, right? Muslims say he was a great prophet, right? So they all want to give him accolades as at least a good guy in some respect. But Jesus never gave anybody else credit for anything else. It's like, I'm it. So there's something about him that people are just drawn to. Like, I want a piece of Jesus, man. What is it about him that nobody else is saying, I want a piece of Muhammad. I want a piece of Buddha. I want a piece of, Vishnu. They don't, they might, if you are
A lot of people want to be like the Buddha.
maybe,
To be fair. I mean, that's a big part of it.
But if you know what Buddhism is giving you, which is basically nothingness, it's kind of an odd seeking. It's almost like high in nihilism, but you embrace it as opposed to seeing it as a downside. I don't get it. It doesn't make sense to me to want nothingness. But anyways, I think that what I do believe is this. There seems to be a chapter in the Bible that talks about people who God judges them based on what they knew. They were ignorant. They were trying to find God, and they only knew so much. They grew up in some part of the world that they'd never heard of Christ. They didn't know any different. They were trying to seek God. And maybe, and again, I am not making this as a theology or Christian truth or reality. I'm just curious. Maybe God gives them a sense of he was trying to find me. They just didn't know the right name. I know this. If you've heard Christ and rejected it, you're gone. There's no way out of that. There's no return. But if you never heard of him, I wondered myself, maybe the Native Americans, the Great White Spirits, they were on to something. They just didn't know what he was. And I wonder if that's in a way, I don't want to say a loophole. It sounds like it's, that it's trivial, but maybe God loves people enough to say, no, I have special access for some of these folks for certain reasons that I wouldn't understand as a human. I only know I'm responsible for what I know. And if I know Jesus, if I heard Jesus, now I have no way out because I reject him. And that's the problem. But, like I said, you did. You said yes, then you said no. What does that mean? I didn't save myself anyways, right? God does all the work. I just said yes. But does that mean suddenly if I started doing bad things like I did, I certainly had a prodigal journey. Did that mean suddenly I was unsaved for a while? Well, I don't think so. The prodigal son was never not the son of the guy. He just was not living a honorable life under the name of this father, but the father couldn't wait for him to come home. And obviously, if you truly were a believer, God's waiting at the end of the path saying, come home, Dan. And that's part of why I'm here. I know, buddy, I know it sounds, pandering or patronizing. I don't mean it that way. I do believe it's true, and I do believe I'm here because he wants you to come home. So, if nothing else, indulge my foolishness in my fantasies and my absurdities, because at least I mean well. I care about your soul and your eternity. Matter of fact, I'm going to say this. Jesus, I know he doesn't believe in you. I do. I pray if it's possible for that guy, that Dan, to know you and return and find out, oh my gosh, thank you, Lord, for that. Let him have that. Either way, I hope we can still be friends. In Jesus' name, amen. Hey, thank you, Dan. I appreciate you coming on, buddy. You're a special guy. I'm sure we will do it again. Folks, this was Objectively Dan. Go watch his podcast. If nothing else, if you don't agree with him, try to learn how to defend your faith. If you do agree with him, then maybe you shouldn't have been a Christian anyways. Whatever it is, go find what you were supposed to be. But as for me and my house, we're serving the Lord. Remember, if they ever say you're politically incorrect, just tell them thanks for the compliment. You want to speak truth. You don't want to be coerced or censored by those who want to have power over you. And remember, all I can do is my best. And what does that consist of? I hope, but the woke, back to sleep. See you next Monday.